Steve Schmidt here at The Warning. Thrilled to be joined by my friend Tara Palmeri at the Red Letter, wearing her closed for August hat. Close, but not quite.
No, we never stopped, do we?
Never stopping, never stopped. And your reporting has been pretty extraordinary lately about the Jeffrey Epstein case. And you're somebody who, I don't know if people know this about you, but you have a really interesting range of journalism credentials and experiences. You worked for the New York Post.
Mm-hmm.
You ran the Politico Brussels bureau, and
I didn't run it, but I was a part of it. Yeah.
Well, you ran.
We want to take away from those.
You ran like Brussels Playbook, right? You were one.
Yeah, I wrote a column called the Playbook
Okay.
in their publication. Yeah.
And so you covered that. You've been at ABC News. You've been at the White House. You were at Puck. And one of the interesting things that I really didn't know about you until I got to know you is that when you left ABC News, you wound up doing a couple podcasts. And you spent a lot of time with a lot of these girls who were Jeffrey Epstein victims.
Yeah.
And so you knew Virginia Giuffre. You drove around the country with her. You knocked on doors with her, trying to get to the bottom of this story. And more than any other person who writes about this, you've helped me really understand at the core what this is about, or crystallized it for me. And what it's about is this extraordinary abuse of power against innocents, right? Against kids, some of the most famous names, some of the most powerful people in the country are implicated in this. And you've been on it, and you have been all over it as this has swirled for like the last month and a half. And you've done an extraordinary amount of reporting. And any person who asks me about like what's going on with the Epstein files, I always say, place you have to start now, I think, is at the Red Letter.
Thank you.
Capitalize in this moment. So you have some extraordinary reporting, including about Epstein's connections to CIA.
Yeah.
And including this interview that you do with Michael Cohen.
Yeah.
This interview that you do with Michael Cohen is pretty extraordinary. It's really dramatic because you're asking him a question and I'm assessing his reaction through a psychological prism of this is a guy who's under pressure. And you're asking him a question about an Epstein victim, and specifically about a girl named Katie Johnson who filed a suit. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, but I want to go inside this Michael Cohen interview and just start out by asking you to give some context to it. Like what are we watching there in that because I think there's a pretty big piece of news that comes out of this interview. And news is a 4-letter word, with 3 of them being the word new.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So new information that really moves this story closer to Trump, not in the realm of conspiracy, but in the world of fact. So what were you trying to do in the interview, and what's that interview about with Cohen?
Yeah, so Steve, I think what I was seeing a lot of, on TV, on CNN, on MSNBC, I saw Cohen coming in and out talking about Trump. And in fact, he actually reached out to me and he said, "Do you want to do I think we connected about doing a live, but he sent me his latest from MSNBC." About how he was saying that he didn't believe that Trump had ever been to Epstein's Island. And honestly, I don't think that Trump went to Epstein's Island. We don't have a record of it on a flight log. And he's just the type of guy who stays on his own properties. Like that's his thing. You even watch him flying all over the world. He tries to stay in his own places. But it doesn't mean they weren't very close at the height of his sex trafficking operation. They were very good friends in Palm Beach, Upper East Side. They swam in the same circles. But it sort of dawned on me as I had heard Cohen say, like, I just know that he hadn't been there. And then, why? Because of the way he said it 4 or 5 times. And it was like, there was no question about why he said he knew that Epstein that Donald Trump had been on Epstein Island. He was just like, I just know, and just didn't like really explain to the audience at all why. And then I was looking at other appearances he had made on TV talking about this. And the other one was he threw cold water on the Wall Street Journal's report about the card, this kind of lewd card that Trump had given to Epstein for his 50th birthday in the shape of a naked woman's body. And it suggested that they both knew about a sexual secret between the two of them. And so he said, I don't believe that Trump does that. He doesn't doodle. Turns out his doodles have been sold at Sotheby's. He very much poured cold water on this. And I think then the lights sort of went on for me. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, there were cases of people connected to Jeffrey Epstein, specifically this Katie Johnson, Jane Doe, who came forward before the election. And she dropped her case just days before, citing intimidation. And who was the fixer at the time? Like, who would have dealt with that? Who would actually know about these cases, about these complaints? And I thought, oh, yeah, it's Michael Cohen. It's so obvious that he would be a great source on this. I mean, at the same time, he was dealing with Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, David Pecker at, a National Enquirer. Like, this was the person that Trump would go to when something like this came up. And Katie Johnson is a Jane Doe name. That's not her real name. But she just kept coming up in all of my comments and my feeds, and everyone's like, Tara, Katie Johnson, because she's the most prominent complainant to come out against Donald Trump, accusing him of raping her in Epstein's apartment when she was young, like a 13 or 14-year-old model. I think it was 13-year-olds. Yeah, 13-year-old model. So this is obviously a very shocking allegation that was dropped days before the election due to intimidation. And it was filed 3 times, first time in California and the second 2 times in New York. So it was very clear that the first question to ask him was about this case and just his involvement. And I didn't even ask him directly about the case. I just asked, do you know anything about President Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Because you worked for him for a very long time, over a decade. And he was very defensive. He's like, I know nothing about Epstein. Nothing. I know nothing about Epstein. Never met him. Never this or that. I never talked to Trump about Epstein. Nothing. He literally said, I never talked to Trump about Epstein, which seemed very shocking to me that he had never talked to Donald Trump about Epstein, because I knew that a lawyer for one of the victims reached out to Trump's lawyer saying, I want to subpoena him in our case against Epstein, because Trump and Epstein were enemies. And Trump actually helped this lawyer, by the way, gave him tips and told him what to do. They hated each other over a real estate deal, not over the girls, by the way, just to be clear. They were both fighting over waterfront property in Palm Beach called the House of Friends, which is kind of ironic. And because of the bidding war, Epstein drove up the price for Trump and he was pissed. And their friendship broke up over that. Again, this is the person who was intercepting all this stuff. Cohen would have been the fixer. So I just asked him, and I asked him specifically about Katie Johnson, and he said, no, I know nothing about it. But then he finally said, I know about this one girl, infant, he called her. And it sounded very much like the Katie Johnson case, and that he had sent a private investigator to find her, and that what they found when they went to the address that was listed on the complaint was a parking lot in the Bronx. And I just thought to myself, well, of course, think of Jane Doe is going to put their own address. They might as well just put their name on it. You're a Jane Doe because you want anonymity. You don't want to be harassed by private investigators. I remember one of the victims for Jeffrey Epstein, Courtney Wild. She told me that when she sued Epstein, his private investigators nearly ran her off the road. They're often using cases like this to dig up dirt on these girls. And to intimidate them.
So I just want to slow this down.
Mm-hmm.
So in this moment, when I'm watching this. And he is aggressive, he's defensive, he's talking, he's saying, I saw somebody say this on the notes underneath that, I have nothing to lie about. I have no reason to defend Trump, and so on and so forth. And then, right, this interview kind of makes a turn, and he asserts, oh, yeah, I sent out a private investigator, and the allegations were heinous, and it was a 13-year-old. And he's the guy in that moment who admits, yeah, that's me, right? I'm the guy who sends out the private investigator when someone makes this allegation against Trump, right? So so he makes that admission, and then he says, and I thought this was very odd, and I was wondering if you've checked it out beyond this, but he says, he calls the lawyer. The lawyer says that, well, my client's not real, and I'm sorry, and they withdraw the case, and that's the end of it. And I just asked because this morning, as John Bolton is facing FBI agents in his driveway, right, full weight of the government coming down, it doesn't seem really to be in Trump's character, right, to be the forgiving type if he faces a false accusation from
a very serious accusation
to shake him down. And the accusation, right, if you're going to make a false accusation about someone, right, the false accusation of you raped a 13-year-old is way up there, right? If someone made a false accusation, right, against me on that subject, it would be forever war, right? And it wouldn't be let's forgive and forget. And I just think it's inconsistent with Trump's personality. But did I understand Cohen correctly? Is that what he said happened?
Yeah, he said that he had never met his client before, and that he was sorry.
The lawyer who filed the suit.
What was that? I'm sorry.
The lawyer who filed the suit, right?
There were three lawyers.
Cohen had never met this person.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that lawyer had never met his client. And they said that to Cohen. That's
yeah. And Cohen said that this case would have been on the docket too. And so the only case that is on the docket from that period of time before the election is the Katie Johnson one. There's no other one. So I don't know. And that one was withdrawn, by the way. So I don't know what this other case is, or if he's actually, in fact, speaking about the Katie Johnson case, because it sounded to me like that's what he was talking about. But it all just doesn't make sense. And I asked him, like, well, why didn't you retaliate? Like, you could file an you should have. It just seems like that's the kind of thing you would retaliate against if someone made an accusation like that.
Sure.
Right? Or no?
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, oh, and he sort of brushed that off, which I thought was interesting. And then, there's been some follow-up. There's been some other reporting too about David Pecker being involved in this, from Ronan Farrow's reporting for The New Yorker, that Cohen may have worked with him on other Epstein allegations for catch and kills. I didn't do this reporting myself, but it's worth looking into. It's hard to believe that he worked for Trump for those years and didn't intercept Epstein issues. I mean, he started the interview by saying, I know nothing about Epstein. I never talked to Trump about Epstein. And then he admits that he and Trump had an actual conversation about this Jane Doe. And what Trump says is it's bullshit. And he says, I'll handle it. And then Trump said, and I said, well, did you ask him any details? Because like, if I was a lawyer working on a case and that was my client, I want to know as much detail as possible so I can defend it to death, right? Like, tell me everything is what I would say. And he was just like, no, Trump says, I'll handle it. And I believed him when he said it was bullshit, and I just did it. And it's like, okay. It seems odd to me.
You then write another story about this, which is about the connections between Epstein, the driver, and CIA.
Yes. Yeah. The
What?
chauffeur. Yeah. Not the chauffeur, the bodyguard. Yeah.
So at some level, right, this reads like a novel.
I know.
Right. But what is the gist of that story that you just reported?
Okay. So that story is based on an interview that I had with a lawyer for one of the victims, Brad Edwards. He led the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which was the attempt to try to overturn the sweetheart deal. And so he had a lot of interaction with Jeffrey Epstein as he tried to overturn the 2008 sweetheart deal, making the argument that the victims weren't actually told that there was a non-prosecution agreement, and therefore they violated their crime victims' rights. And this is an invalid. This is invalid. It should be overturned, and the case should be opened again and reprosecuted. And so Epstein wanted Brad gone. The last thing he wanted was his 2008 sweetheart deal overturned and reprosecuted. And so Brad really became a threat to him. And Brad, in his process of trying to put together a case, thought that the chauffeur of 5 years during the height of the sex trafficking operation, around the years, I think from 2003-ish, 2002 to, he was an MMA fighter named Igor Zinoviev, okay, from Russia. And sorry, MMF. I'm not a big wrestling person, but he's from Russia, big guy, looks like a bouncer. His name's Igor Zinoviev. And he warned Brad, you don't know who you're messing with. You're on Jeffrey's radar. It's really bad. And Brad's like, well, tell me, like, what do you mean? And Igor says to him, he's CIA, or he's got connections to CIA. He's very much protected there. And then Brad says, like, tell me how. And so this is all Brad's reporting about, retelling. He writes about it in his book, but he told me in an interview, which you can listen to. And he says, during Epstein's arrest, when he was in that state prison, state jail, county jail, whatever you want to call it, he went to the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, for Epstein for him. And he sat through classes for about a week that no civilians were sitting through. And at the end, he got a binder with a letter in it. And in that binder, he brought it to Epstein in prison, in his detention, not prison, jail, in detention. And he said that when he was there, he got the feeling that Epstein was a very powerful person inside of CIA. I know you might be thinking, okay, this is just like one person's account. This guy, Igor Zinoviev, he sounds like a shadowy sort of bouncer type bodyguard. But I went back to a colleague of mine from the New York Post who had interviewed him on the record and had used him as a source, ML Nostell. And I asked him, I was like, what's the story of this Igor guy? Is he legitimate? And ML said he very much thinks he's legitimate, but he had gone under the radar and he was really hard to find after the Epstein story broke, which is actually true of a lot of the people around Epstein. They've been very hard to get to talk. And I called the CIA and I exchanged emails with them over a month saying, hey, I know you guys keep a record of all of the people. At the very least, you have a log of all the people that have come through Langley, gone in and out. You would know if this person was in your building. Just give me a yes or a no on the record. Yes or no. Nothing. It's been months. Called, email exchanges. It's not like it's just been a one-way thing. Like they're like, we'll get back to you by your deadline. We'll get back to you by your deadline. We'll get back to you by your deadline. They never do. And so on Monday, I sent out another one saying, like, just so you know, I am going to publish. This is your opportunity to say this guy was never on our grounds. And then I interviewed a former CIA analyst of 28 years, clandestine services, very high up. And he said, oh, yeah, no, they have a record of everyone. It's a fucking CIA. Excuse me, it's the CIA. Like, they know everyone. And so it was really kind of like, it was strange to me that they would, not even respond. But it makes a lot of sense. And the more I've done reporting on this, it made me start to think that Epstein was very much working both sides of the law. I'm not saying that he was a spy. He couldn't have. I mean, Americans are not they can't really be aid assets. They're not supposed to be. They can volunteer information. If you're an American who travels around a lot and meets with a lot of very prominent people, like princes, dignitaries, prominent business people abroad, you can volunteer information that you get to the FBI or the CIA, to intelligence services. And that certainly puts you on the good side of the law. I mean, it's not unprecedented for criminals to tip off law enforcement. It's not always a gun to the head type of relationship. I mean, look at Whitey Bulger. He was killing people.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, he was killing people while he was informing the FBI. And so the thinking is that Epstein could have been a sort of hyper fixer for the CIA. And he was certainly informing the FBI for a very long time, at least according to Vicky Ward's reporting. I mean, she's another journalist who's been covering Epstein for a long time, and she interviewed his partner, Stephen Hoffenberg, who ran one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history, $490 million. Stephen Hoffenberg was in prison for the rest of his life, but his partner, Jeffrey Epstein, did not go to prison. And Ward reports that at that point, Epstein had met with prosecutors at least 3 times with FBI and given them information on Hoffenberg. So he basically dimed out his partner and didn't have to go to prison. And according to her reporting, Epstein would have spent maybe even more time in prison than Hoffenberg. Hoffenberg went on to sue Epstein and say that he was the architect of the scheme, which, I mean, that's kind of, you would expect him to do something like that. But the point is that Epstein was very much aware of how to work with law enforcement and intelligence services like the FBI and the CIA, which work very closely together. There's also a freedom of information request that the Wall Street Journal put in for his calendar. And in Epstein's schedule, there's a meeting with Bill Burns, who was the deputy Secretary of State. And Secretary of State and CIA work very closely together. In fact, a lot of diplomats are actually CIA analysts. And then Bill Burns obviously went on to be CIA director under the Biden administration. So there are a lot of connections, and it explains why someone like Epstein would get a sweetheart deal. I mean, there's even a document in the vault, if you guys ever want to go in there and look through Epstein's files, thousands and thousands of pages, mostly redacted. But it says that his assets were returned to him after giving the FBI information. So this was very common. He knew a lot of really powerful people. And I also believe that a big part of the way that he was able to, I guess people say, where did his wealth come from, right? I think he ran a classic KGB honeypot scheme in which he brought very wealthy, powerful people around him, men. And he had these girls around that were some of them underage, young. And he created this sort of bacchanal experience on the island or any of his other very isolated properties. He surveilled them. He had dirt on them. And at the end of the time that they were together, he was basically like, invest with me and I will put the money somewhere and I'll make, and they're probably like, who is this guy? But they also know that he knows things that would cause social embarrassment for them. And so he gets their money and he puts it probably offshore, somewhere where it's very hard for them to reach, right? Or difficult. And even Jess Stanley, I mean, he's a huge banker. And everyone's like, why would he give Epstein, a guy who was a math teaching dropout, all of his money? It doesn't make any sense. He wasn't some great financier who was tripling people's wealth. But you do see emails where Jess Stanley's asking Epstein for Snow White or Beauty and the Beast for next time.
I am truly like, we got like over 1,000 people with us. And I just like, I'm totally whatever end of the spectrum, right? The most allergic to the conspiracy theories is, that's like where I am. Right. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm very, very skeptical. But the one thing, I mean, like, talk to me like I'm an idiot here. There's like one thing that makes no sense to me.
Yes.
Around the Epstein suicide. He got away with all of this.
Yeah.
He was the most prolific pedophile, 1,000 girls abused. He got caught, but he didn't go to a dark hole for the rest of his life.
Mm-mm.
He had a very minor sentence, and then he went back to his life. So
celebrated afterwards as well.
Right. And so it makes when just have as a lay person who's not an expert in all things in the case, what is the contrary to that? What do people say when you assert or someone asserts? It just makes no sense from a motive perspective that the guy would have killed himself in Rikers Island.
Well, he was actually in downtown prison.
Downtown prison. Yeah. That's right. He wasn't even at Rikers Island.
No, he was in the prison where El Chapo was placed.
Yep.
I'm a bit of an Epstein nerd, so I know some people were saying she's talking very quickly and hard to follow and this and that. I've just been so in this for a very long time. I'm sorry, Steve. Can you ask me? Really quick again?
for the people,
why wouldn't he kill himself?
Don't live it and breathe it. Like, are you skeptical? Right? Like when the state says right now he killed himself, right? And then the minutes of the tapes are meeting. You sit there, you say, what? What is happening with that? And then simultaneously, the last thing I wanted to ask you, I know you have to go, is about Maxwell's move to the minimum security, right, facility and what that prefaces. But I just on the question of the guy's suicide, it's just like when you process his story, am I crazy as a person who looks at the suicide and just says this makes no sense to me?
No, you're not. In fact, I have the same feelings. Julie K. Brown, who a lot of people are referencing in the comments, like I worked with her on one of my podcasts. She was the executive producer. And she thinks the same way. I mean, it's really hard to take it. And again, I am a journalist. I've been a journalist for 15 years. Like I work in the land of facts. I don't post things that I think I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just presenting what I know. And I go to the sources and try to get, I try to get confirmation. But it is very strange. Like the fact that they presented us with a video, but it doesn't show the actual cell. That's very strange. That's supposed to be the surveillance that we should consider to be a fact. The missing minute. It doesn't make sense. Also, his whole idea of I don't know if you saw his note before he died, but he wrote to someone prison is no fun. If there's one thing about Epstein and Brad Edwards, who I interviewed, by the way, and if everyone really wants to deep dive into this, I just wrote a piece on it. I also have a YouTube post I just put up. But Brad Edwards,
who's real quick, just for everybody, before you get into the Brad Edwards thing, what are the names of the podcasts that you've done on this, and where can people find this? And just the pieces, just go through them real quick that are on the red letter in the last couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah, so my latest piece on the red letter was about the bodyguard and how he explained Epstein's CIA connections, and then my experience reporting this out and getting in touch with people and trying to put the pieces together based on my reporting, prior reporting, and my latest interactions with the CIA and trying to follow up with Igor, the bodyguard. I also was the host of Broken, Jeffrey Epstein. That is executive produced by Julie K. Brown, like I mentioned. I'm also, and a number of other great journalists like Adam Davidson from The New Yorker and Adam McKay, the Academy Award winner. I also did another series on Ghislaine Maxwell and her family called Power the Maxwells for Sony. And then I wrote a piece for Politico magazine called The Women Who Enabled Jeffrey Epstein. It took me months to do that one as well. So I've been on this for a while. I've remained close with, Virginia Giuffre, even up until her death. And I don't believe that she was killed, like people say, having spoken to her. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I know she struggled after living a lifetime of abuse. But I do think on the whole idea of him not killing himself, he was very much a narcissist who believed he could get away with things because he did. And even in his final days before his arrest, he bragged to Brad Edwards, who was trying to overturn his sweetheart deal, and said, you're wasting your time. Trump's my boy, or something like that. And Bill and Bill Barr is his. It was something along those lines, you're wasting your time because I've got Trump in my pocket, kind of thing. And not that I think he believed it. I think he did. I think he believed he'd get out again. Think about how many times he had brushes with the law and he had been able to continue on. He felt invincible. He felt untouchable.
He had no reason to be pessimistic. Let's put it.
And who, if you wrote me from prison and I said, no fun.
No fun. No fun. No fun. Speaking of fun, I was thinking about the Ghislaine Maxwell minimum security prison to which she's been transferred. I was just saying to somebody, apparently they raise puppies there. And I think I could enjoy a sentence there for like a year if I could get into that program, right, with the puppies. So anyway, I don't know what insight you have on this, but this is another thing that's clear to me, right? So there's some conversation, I believe, that went on, right? I have no evidence of this, right? But common sense tells you that, she probably is sitting there saying, I want a pardon. Somebody tells her Trump can't pardon you. Yeah. But what we can do for you is we can move you, right? To the best place that you can possibly go, which is this place. And so she goes to this place and she gets there, and all the women at the prison who raise the puppies do not want the sex trafficker raising puppies with them. So she's banned from raising the puppies with them. It's another inmate who has complained about her. She's in the news today that she was disciplined and put into solitary for making a complaint about Maxwell. So at any rate, she's sitting there now at this minimum security prison. What is going to happen to her next, right? It seems like she's kind of in a waiting place, like in a temporary location waiting to get sprung, which I think they intend to do, but I don't think the Trump people know how to do. Am I analyzing that correctly? Like what's going on with that, with her? And then the last thing I want to ask you is just to tell people who she is. Who is Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yeah, she is the right-hand man to Jeffrey Epstein, Bonnie and Clyde, the woman who went out and was able to satisfy, as she would say, his desire for 3 girls per day. And she did that as a posh English woman who told these young girls, teens, that they were beautiful, they were wonderful, and she could make their dreams come true. She trapped them. The bait and switch, terrible. And so many of them actually feel more betrayed by her than even by Epstein. She often actually molested them alongside Epstein. So, this is a person that should be probably in a maximum security prison, not in a day camp with tents and with fences and puppies. And yet here she is. And a lot of the survivors that I speak to fear that it's just going to be house arrest next, ankle bracelet. And then we're just sort of getting the American people used to the idea, with the idea that she is not actually innocent. I mean, she's not actually guilty or culpable for this. I mean, the fact that Newsmax is suggesting, Greg Kelly said, maybe she's innocent. 1,000 victims, all with the same story. But no, maybe she's innocent. It's kind of, and the creepy thing is that the way that they groomed, they did it the same way every time. They almost have near identical stories. That's the crazy thing about this all. And so many parents went to the Palm Beach police to complain. This is not this was so out in the open. That's the craziest part about it to me too, is how obvious it was. And yet, people looked away for so long. And even now, it's so obvious that what's happening is injustice. And still, it feels like it's slipping away for a lot of the survivors who thought that this was at least a shred of justice. I mean, they were hopeful that, because believe me, all 1,000 of those victims were not just for Jeffrey Epstein. And they were hoping for more. And so that is sort of that's what's really hard about this. If you actually think about it from a human perspective, like we get into the politics and the cover up and the whole idea of this international con man, which he was, but like, let's not forget the people whose lives are broken because of it, and how the way that the Justice Department is playing with this is only creating more pain for them.
And yet it keeps inspiring you to keep chasing them down.
Yeah, I do, because like this is a story about people ultimately, and two-tier justice, and like it's just, it's funny. Somebody was asking me like, what would you do if you weren't a journalist? And I'm like, probably be in law enforcement. Like this kind of story is the one that gets me angered, and I think we've lost a lot of trust in the institutions because of stories like this.
Do you think that the deployments of National Guard and military and the escalations there are related to the heat of this story getting close to Trump and singeing him, that they are cause and effect, that story, the mishandling of it by Bondi and others over the last 30 days has created the situation in DC, for instance?
I do think so. I mean, it's pretty outrageous, right? And maybe, but at the same time, it could be normalizing future cities to be held under by the National Guard. But I do think like they're really trying everything. First, it was let's rename the commanders back to the red, whatever they're called, the Redskins. Before that, let's do this, let's do that. Shock and awe, shock and awe. Let's try to get people to not pay attention to the story. It's just shocking. Like it just reeks when someone says case closed. I think it reeks of corruption. You can't tell people case closed without actually investigating the case. Yeah. So I can't tell you how, like, I've never felt that they were that strategic, his people, but this is a problem that's probably not going away. So.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see you live out some of the words on that hot close for August. That'd be good, right? We're now north of the 20th, so we're in the dog days of August, everybody. I hope everybody gets some time off. It's good to know that Tara Palmeri is on the case and reporting. I read the Red Letter every day. It's one of the best Substack publications out there. I love every time that Tara comes on. And when you look at the places, everybody, where you're going to find out the information, we have a First Amendment in the United States, and the First Amendment is what creates the free media, not the corporations that own networks. And in the 1910s and the 19-teens, there were reporters who were known as muckrakers who got to the bottom of what was happening in the society because it wasn't printed in the major newspapers necessarily. And so Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, I think it's Upton Sinclair, about the packing industry, and others. And Tara is one of a small group of people that are in that elite group of the 21st century muckraker.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you, Steve.
Highly experienced reporter who has become an entrepreneur and started a media business. And all of you on this should subscribe to it, and you should do paid subscriptions. That's how independent journalists keep going. And so support the muckrakers, support the people that are giving you the information you need to know in a free society where our leaders are accountable to us and not the other way around. And so she's just one of the best. Tara.
Thank you. I appreciate. And Steve, and obviously you all know Steve. I'm sure most of you are here for him. He's obviously a great thought leader and seems to really get to the heart of the issue. So I'm so grateful for you that you have had me on your platform and introduced me to your community. At the warning, you do always seem to see things before the others. You are prescient in that sense. So thank you. And just very flattered to be here. And yes, we got to keep holding people to account. So I appreciate that.
Fine chart, the red letter, everybody. And have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Take care. Go Blue Jays.
That was another episode of the Tara Palmeri Show. Thanks to all of you. If you want more of my reporting, you can go to tarapalmeri.com and sign up for my newsletter, The Red Letter. That's TARAPALMERI.com. And you can get my exclusive reporting straight to your inbox. And you can watch these lives in real time as I try to talk to sources and try to get down to the bottom of things. You can also support this show by liking, subscribing, sharing it with your friends, leaving a review, rating it. You can just send me tips, leads. Let me know what you know. This is a huge, sprawling case, and it's going to take a lot of time. I want to thank my producer, Eric Abinate. I want to thank my thumbnail artists, Adam Stewart, Sarah Carney and Abby Baker on socials, and Luke Radel, who has been helping with research. I'll be back again soon.